I never thought I'd feel like a stranger in my own family until the day my daughter-in-law, Emily, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "This gathering is for family only, Margaret." Those words hung in the air between us, sharp and cold. As I stood on their doorstep holding a homemade apple pie still warm from the oven, behind her, I could hear laughter spilling from their dining room, the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversation. My son David's voice carried above the others, telling some joke that triggered an eruption of delight. I wasn't invited to hear it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Margaret Wilson, 62 years old, a retired elementary school librarian. I've lived alone since Robert, my husband of 35 years, passed away from a heart attack 3 years ago. We had one son, David, who was the center of our world. David was always a bright child, excelling in school and later becoming a successful architect. 5 years ago, he married Emily Chen, a marketing executive with ambition that matched his own. When I first met Emily, I welcomed her with open arms. She was charming, driven, and David clearly adored her. I believed our relationship would grow naturally over time. I didn't expect to become her best friend overnight, but I did hope for mutual respect and inclusion in their lives. I wanted to be the kind of mother-in-law who added value rather than stress. For the first year, things seemed fine. Emily was polite if somewhat distant at family gatherings. When Robert was still alive, we'd have Sunday dinners together every other week. After his passing, those invitations became less frequent, then stopped altogether. "We're just so busy, Mom," David would explain over the phone, his voice tinged with apology, but not enough conviction to actually change anything. I tried not to take it personally. Young couples need space to build their own lives, their own traditions. That's what all the magazine articles say, right? So I stepped back, made myself available without being pushy, called only once a week, always asked about Emily first when we spoke. Then came that Saturday evening when I discovered just how far outside the circle I had fallen. It started with a Facebook post, one of David's colleagues congratulating him on his promotion and mentioning the wonderful celebration at his home. I hadn't heard about any promotion, nor any celebration. When I called David, he sounded startled, then admitted there was a small gathering happening that evening. "It's just a few work friends, Mom, nothing fancy." Something in his tone made me suspicious. "That sounds lovely. Should I bring something? I could make that apple pie you love." A long pause. "Actually, Emily's already ordered dessert from that bakery downtown. Maybe next time?" I knew then that this wasn't just a spontaneous work thing. This was planned, deliberate, and I wasn't part of it. Still, I baked that pie anyway, telling myself I'd just drop it off as a surprise. When I arrived at their beautiful craftsman home in Oakwood Heights, cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. Music drifted through the open windows, along with the sound of at least 20 people enjoying themselves. This was no small work gathering. This was a party, a significant one, judging by the catering van parked out front. I stood on their porch, apple pie in hand, suddenly feeling foolish but unwilling to retreat. When I rang the doorbell, Emily answered, her face transitioning from hostess smile to tight-lipped annoyance when she saw me. "Margaret," she said, blocking the entrance, "we weren't expecting you." "I just wanted to drop this off for David's promotion," I explained, extending the pie. "I won't stay." That's when she said those words. "This gathering is for family only, Margaret. Family only." Yet there I stood, David's mother, definitively not family in Emily's eyes. I could have pointed out the obvious, that the house was filled with colleagues and friends, not family. I could have pushed past her and found David. Instead, I stood there, pie in my trembling hands, feeling like I'd been slapped. "I see," I said, my voice barely audible above the music and laughter. Please give David my congratulations. Emily took the pie with a smile that never reached her eyes. I'll tell him you stopped by. As I walked back to my car, I caught a glimpse through the window of David raising a toast, Emily sliding in beside him, my pie disappearing somewhere off to the side, probably headed straight for the trash. That image burned itself into my memory, my son and his wife, illuminated. In the warm light of their home, surrounded by people they considered more important than me, I drove home to my quiet house on Maple Street, the one where David had grown up, where Robert and I had built our life together. The silence felt heavier than usual that night. I sat in Robert's old armchair, wishing he were there to tell me I was overreacting, that these things happen, that I should give them space. But deep down, I knew Robert would have been hurt too. The next morning, I woke up with a new resolve. If I wasn't family to them, then perhaps it was time to redefine what family meant to me. I had spent years accommodating their boundaries, respecting their space, always being the one to reach out. Maybe it was time to create some boundaries of my own. I started by joining a book club at the local library where I used to work. Reconnected with old colleagues, made new friends. I volunteered at the community garden and took a watercolor class at the senior center. For the first time since Robert died, I was building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for crumbs of attention from my son and daughter-in-law. When David called the following week, I let it go to voicemail. His message sounded surprised, almost hurt. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" I called back 2 days later, keeping the conversation light and brief. "I'm fine, just busy with some new activities. How are you both?" This new dynamic continued for several months. I stopped initiating contact as frequently, stopped offering to help with every little thing. When we did talk, I shared stories about my new friends and interests rather than just asking about their lives. David seemed confused by the change, but didn't question it directly. Then, out of the blue, Emily called me one Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was warm, friendly in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Margaret, it's been too long. David and I were wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner this Friday." The invitation was so unexpected that I nearly agreed automatically. Then I remembered my watercolor class. "I'm sorry, I have plans on Friday. Perhaps another time?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Emily wasn't used to hearing no from me. "Oh, well, what about Saturday then? We really want to see you." The urgency in her tone piqued my curiosity. "Saturday should work. Is there a special occasion?" No, she said quickly. "We just miss you. It's been a while." When I arrived at their house that Saturday, something felt different. Emily greeted me with a hug, something she'd never done before. And David seemed unusually attentive, pulling out my chair, refilling my wine glass before it was even half empty. The conversation flowed easily enough, but there was an undercurrent of tension, like they were building up to something. After dessert, store-bought cheesecake, not homemade, David cleared his throat and exchanged a look with Emily. "Mom, we have some exciting news to share." My heart jumped. Were they going to tell me they were expecting a baby? After years of them saying they weren't ready for children, was I finally going to be a grandmother? "We're buying a lake house," Emily exclaimed, clasping her hands together. "That property on Lake Windermere we've always talked about finally came on the market." I forced a smile. "That's wonderful. Congratulations." David leaned forward, elbows on the table. "It's a fantastic investment opportunity. The market in that area is booming, and the house itself needs minimal work." Emily nodded enthusiastically. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, private dock, amazing sunset views. We can use it ourselves on weekends and rent it out during peak season." They continued describing the property in detail. The stone fireplace, the wraparound deck, the boathouse that could be converted into a guest suite. I listened and nodded, wondering why this information required an in-person dinner. It wasn't until they'd exhausted their description that the real purpose of the evening emerged. "So," Emily said, her voice shifting to a softer tone, "we need to finalize the financing this week." David took over. "Our mortgage broker found us a great rate, but we're a little short on the down payment to avoid PMI." I waited, already sensing where this was headed. "We were hoping," Emily continued, "that you might help us with a loan, just until my year-end bonus comes through. It's only about $40,000. Only $40,000, as if that were pocket change. "Or," David added quickly, seeing my expression, "you could co-sign for us. Your credit score is excellent, and it would really help us secure better terms." There it was. After months of minimal contact, after being explicitly told I wasn't family at their celebration, I was suddenly family enough to provide financial backing for their vacation property. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I took a slow sip of water, collecting my thoughts. "I'm surprised you'd ask me for this. The last time we really talked, I was informed that I wasn't considered family." David's face registered shock. "What? When did that happen?" I looked directly at Emily. "At your promotion party, the one I wasn't invited to." Emily's cheeks flushed. "That was a misunderstanding. I never said—" "You said the gathering was for family only," I interrupted quietly. "Your exact words." David turned to his wife, confusion evident on his face. "You told my mother she wasn't family?" Emily's composure slipped momentarily. "I didn't mean it like that. You know how stressful that night was, with all your colleagues there. I just didn't want to explain why your mom showed up unexpectedly." "I showed up because I wasn't told about an important milestone in my son's life," I said. "I had to learn about his promotion from someone else's social media post." The room fell silent. David looked genuinely troubled, while Emily's expression had hardened into something defensive, almost calculating. "Mom," David finally said, "I'm sorry if you felt excluded. That was never our intention." I noted his choice of words, "if you felt excluded," as if my feelings were the problem, not their actions. "I appreciate that," I said, deciding to move past it. "Now, about this loan. I'd need to think about it. $40,000 is a significant amount." Emily's demeanor shifted instantly back to warm and persuasive. "Of course, take your time. But the seller is expecting an answer by Wednesday, so if you could let us know by Tuesday." "We'd pay you back as soon as Emily's bonus comes through," David added. 6 months? Tops." I nodded non-committally. "I'll consider it. Now tell me more about what you've been up to these past few months. We haven't really talked much." The rest of the evening was strained. David tried to maintain the conversation, but Emily's attention had clearly waned once the financial discussion was tabled. When I left, she gave me another hug, this one feeling even more performative than the first. As I drove home, my mind was racing. The hypocrisy was staggering. I wasn't family enough to celebrate achievements with, but I was family enough to foot the bill for their luxury purchase. What would Robert have done in this situation? He had always been more direct than me, more willing to call out inconsistencies. That night, I pulled out our family financial records. Robert had left everything well organized, with clear instructions. Our modest investments, the life insurance policy, the house that was fully paid off, all of it had been managed with careful planning. We had lived frugally, saving for retirement and for David's future. The money was there. I could write them a check tomorrow if I wanted to. But something stopped me. It wasn't just the principle of the matter, though that certainly played a part. It was a deeper realization that this pattern would continue as long as I allowed it. I would be excluded from their lives until they needed something from me, whether it was money, childcare if they ever had kids, or help during a crisis. I would always be an afterthought, someone to be called upon when convenient, but otherwise kept at arm's length. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel angry, not just hurt, but legitimately angry at how I'd been treated. I had spent years making excuses for their behavior, blaming myself for being too clingy or not understanding their need for independence. But their request had stripped away that self-doubt. This wasn't about me being an overbearing mother-in-law. This was about them seeing me as a resource rather than a person with feelings. By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I called David at his office. "Mom, I'm glad you called. Did you have a chance to think about what we discussed?" "I did," I replied. "I've decided I can't provide the loan or cosign for the lake house." Silence then. "Is it because of what Emily said?" "Because I talked to her about that and she feels terrible." "This isn't about punishing Emily," I said carefully. "This is about boundaries. For years, I've respected yours, your need for space, your busy schedules, your decision not to include me in important events. Now I need you to respect mine." "What boundaries?" David sounded genuinely confused. "You've always been there for me, for us." "Exactly," I said. "I've always been there, waiting in the wings, ready to help whenever you needed something. But that's not a relationship, David. That's a convenience." "That's not fair," he protested. "We've been busy building our careers, our life together. And I've been busy rebuilding mine after your father died," I countered. "Yet I always made time for you. When was the last time you asked about my life? Do you know I've taken up watercolor painting? That I volunteer at the community garden 3 days a week? That I've made new friends who actually want to spend time with me?" Another silence, longer this time. When David spoke again, his voice had lost its defensive edge. "I didn't know any of that." "Because you never asked," I said simply. "And now the first real conversation we've had in months is about me giving you money for a vacation property." "It's an investment," he corrected automatically, then seemed to hear himself. "But I understand your point." I softened my tone. "David, I love you. That hasn't changed, but our relationship needs to change. It can't be one-sided anymore." "So you're using this loan as leverage?" The defensiveness was creeping back in. "No," I said firmly. "I'm establishing a boundary. I'm not a bank, and I'm not just your mother when it's convenient. If you want me in your life, it needs to be consistent, not just when you need something from me." The conversation ended somewhat awkwardly, with David promising to think about what I said, but clearly disappointed about the loan. I hung up feeling both drained and strangely liberated. Emily called the next day, her voice honeyed with forced friendliness. "Margaret, I wanted to apologize personally for any misunderstandings. That night at the party, I was just stressed and spoke without thinking. I appreciated the effort, even if the timing made the sincerity questionable." "Thank you, Emily. That means a lot." She paused, clearly expecting me to reconsider the loan based on her apology. When I didn't, she pressed on. "So David mentioned you're unable to help with the lake house?" "That's right," I confirmed. "It's not financially feasible for me. Right now." This wasn't entirely true. I could afford it, but I had decided to allocate those funds differently. The previous day, I had spoken with a financial advisor about setting up an education trust for any future grandchildren and increasing my charitable donations to the literacy program at my old library. Investments in things that mattered to me. Emily's voice took on a sharp edge. "We're offering to pay you back with interest. It's not like we're asking for a handout." "I understand that," I said calmly, "but my answer is still no." There was a heavy silence then. "I always told David you resented me, that you never really accepted me into the family." The accusation was so backwards that I almost laughed. Emily, you're the one who told me I wasn't family. I've spent years trying to be part of your lives, only to be pushed aside until you needed something from me. That's not, she began, then stopped. Fine. We'll figure something out ourselves. After she hung up, I sat in my garden watching butterflies flit between the flowers I'd planted that spring. There was a twinge of guilt. I had the means to help my son, after all. But it was overshadowed by the certainty that I had made the right decision. This wasn't about the money. It was about respect, about being valued for who I was, not what I could provide. 3 weeks passed with no word from either of them. I continued with my new routine: book club on Mondays, volunteering on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, watercolor class on Wednesdays, dinner with my new friends on Friday nights. I discovered I enjoyed bird watching and joined a local Audubon Society group for weekend excursions. My calendar, once dominated by empty spaces, was now pleasantly full. Then, one Sunday afternoon, a knock came at my door. David stood on my porch, alone, holding a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. "Can we talk?" he asked, his expression more solemn than I'd seen it in years. I invited him in, accepting the flowers with a thank you. We sat in the living room, where he looked around as if seeing it for the first time. "You've redecorated," he observed. Indeed, I had. Gone were Robert's dark leather recliners and the heavy curtains. The walls were now a soft sage green, adorned with my own watercolor paintings and photographs from my bird-watching expeditions. Bright, patterned throw pillows added splashes of color to the new cream-colored sofa. I needed a change, I explained. Something that reflected who I am now. David nodded. "It looks good. It looks like you." We sat in silence for a moment before he continued. "We didn't get the lake house." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my son disappointed. "Don't be," he said, surprising me. "It was a wake-up call. After you refused the loan, we looked harder at our finances. We're actually carrying a lot more debt than we should be, given our income. Emily's spending habits." He trailed off. "Well, let's just say we needed a reality check." I listened without commenting, sensing there was more. "But that's not why I'm here," he continued. "I've been thinking about what you said, about our relationship being one-sided. You were right. After Dad died, I should have been more present for you. Instead, I got caught up in my own life and took for granted that you'd always just be there when I needed you." His honesty touched me. "Thank you for acknowledging that." "I'm sorry, Mom. Truly sorry. Not just about the loan, but about everything. The party, the distance, all of it." He leaned forward, eyes earnest. "And I want you to know, I never knew Emily told you that you weren't family. We've had some serious conversations about that. How are things between you two?" I asked carefully. He sighed. "Strained, to be honest. This situation forced us to address some underlying issues we've been ignoring. Emily's relationship with money, her attitude toward family, my family specifically. We're working on it." I nodded, not wanting to interfere in their marriage issues. "The thing is," David continued, "I don't want to lose you, Mom. These past few weeks, realizing how I've taken you for granted, it's been eye-opening. I don't expect things to change overnight, but I want to try. I want to be part of your life again. Your real life, not just when it's convenient for me." His words were what I had longed to hear, but I remained cautious. "I'd like that, David, but I need you to understand that I've changed too. I'm not just sitting at home waiting for your calls anymore. I have my own life now, my own priorities." "I can see that," he said, gesturing around the room. "And I want to know about all of it. Your painting, your volunteering, those new friends you mentioned?" For the next 2 hours, we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. I showed him my watercolor portfolio, told him about the community garden and the reading program I was helping to develop at the library. He listened attentively, asking questions, showing genuine interest. In turn, he opened up about his work, challenges, his worries about his and Emily's financial future, his regrets about our strained relationship. When he left, we had agreed to have dinner every other Sunday, just the two of us at first, giving Emily some time to process everything. He promised to come to my upcoming watercolor exhibition at the senior center, small steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. As I watched him drive away, I felt a cautious hope blossom. Maybe this painful experience had been necessary, a catalyst for change, for growth on both sides. I had found my voice, established my boundaries, and in doing so, may have saved our relationship rather than destroyed it. That evening, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I thought about Robert, about how proud he would be of me for standing my ground. I thought about David, about the man he was, becoming through this difficult process of self-reflection. And I thought about myself, Margaret Wilson, no longer just a mother or a widow, but a woman with her own identity, her own worth, her own voice. The loan I had refused might have bought a lake house, but what we gained instead was potentially far more valuable, the foundation for an authentic relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Only time would tell if this new understanding would last, but for the first time in years, I felt optimistic about our future as a family. A real family, not just in name or when convenient, but in the ways that truly mattered. When I finally made it inside after standing for nearly 20 minutes on their doorstep, the atmosphere in David and Emily's house was more stifling than the summer heat outside. For 3 years, I'd been dropping hints, making gentle inquiries about their financial situation. The signs were everywhere. The designer clothes Emily wore to family gatherings, the luxury car David had needed for client impressions, the extravagant vacations documented meticulously on social media while their mortgage payments lingered behind schedule. My late husband Robert had always maintained detailed financial records, something I'd continued after his passing. It was because of this habit that I knew exactly how much money I'd lent them over the years, nearly $73,000, that they'd conveniently forgotten to repay. Emily had arranged the living room like a stage set. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, plush decorative pillows perfectly arranged on their sectional sofa, a tray of untouched pastries that I knew came from the expensive French bakery downtown. It was a performance designed to convey success and stability, but I could see through the carefully constructed facade. The throw pillows strategically covered a wine stain on the couch. The flowers distracted from the water damage in the corner ceiling. The pastries were an unnecessary expense for people who could barely afford their mortgage payments. "Margaret, please sit." Emily gestured toward the armchair opposite the sofa, the one positioned directly under the air conditioning vent. She knew I hated being cold. It was a subtle power move, one of many I'd endured over the years. I chose the corner of the sofa instead, noting the flash of irritation that crossed her face. David entered from the kitchen carrying a tray with coffee and 3 delicate porcelain cups that I recognized as wedding gifts from his father's sister. Emily had once told me she found them quaint and old-fashioned. Apparently, they were now deemed appropriate for impressing me. "Mom, it's good to see you," David said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and the circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well. Financial stress had a way of manifesting physically, something I remembered all too clearly from the early years of my marriage when Robert and I had struggled to make ends meet. "David, you look tired," I said, accepting the coffee cup. "Are you sleeping enough?" Before he could answer, Emily interjected. "We've both been working so hard. David's new project is demanding, and my promotion has me traveling more than expected. You know how it goes. Success requires sacrifice. I nodded, sipping my coffee to hide my expression. Success hadn't paid their bills, judging by the collection. Notices I'd spotted in their mail pile by the door. I wondered if this was why they'd finally invited me over after months of strained phone calls and canceled plans. Money had a way of bringing people together, especially when one person had it and the others needed it. So, I said, setting down my cup. Tell me about this promotion, Emily. What exactly does a senior marketing director do? Emily launched into a detailed explanation filled with corporate jargon and name-dropping. I listened patiently, noting how she emphasized the prestige of her position while carefully avoiding any mention of her actual salary or the financial benefits of her new role. David watched her with something like desperation in his eyes, nodding enthusiastically at all the right moments. That sounds very impressive, I said when she finally paused for breath. You must be proud, David. Absolutely, he replied quickly. Emily's crushing it at work. Her team respects her so much. I turned my attention to him. And your architectural project? The one keeping you up at night? David shifted uncomfortably. It's challenging but rewarding. The client is demanding, but influential. If we pull this off, it could mean bigger projects down the line. If? I asked, catching the conditional. Emily shot him a look. When? She corrected. When we pull it off. David's being modest. His designs are revolutionary. The client loves them. The choreographed nature of their responses made me weary. This dance had been going on for years, them projecting an image of success while quietly drowning in debt, me pretending to believe, them while silently calculating how much they'd need this time. After another 20 minutes of superficial conversation, Emily finally revealed the true purpose of my visit. She set down her coffee cup with deliberate care and reached for David's hand, another stage gesture meant to convey unity. Margaret, she began, her voice taking on that saccharine quality I'd come to recognize as her asking for money tone. We've been meaning to discuss something important with you. Yes? I kept my face neutral, though I already knew what was coming. David cleared his throat. Mom, you know that property on Lakeside Drive? The Tudor-style house with the boat dock? I nodded. The Hendersons' old place? The one that's been on the market for over a year? That's the one, Emily cut in, leaning forward eagerly. We've made an offer, and they've accepted. Congratulations, I said carefully. That's a beautiful property. It is, David agreed. But more importantly, it's an investment opportunity we couldn't pass up. The location alone guarantees value appreciation, and with some minor renovations, we could easily flip it for a substantial profit. The Hendersons' house was listed at $875,000, far beyond what David and Emily could afford given their current financial situation. They weren't looking for an investment. They were looking for a bailout. Again. That's quite an undertaking, I observed. The Faito Henderson's place needs significant work. The foundation alone would cost— We've had it inspected, Emily interrupted. It's not as bad as people think. Most of the issues are cosmetic. I'd known Harold Henderson for 30 years before he passed away. His widow had confided in me about the structural problems that made selling the house so difficult. The cracked foundation, the outdated electrical system, the mold in the basement. Either Emily and David had hired an incompetent inspector, or they were deliberately minimizing the property's flaws to justify their impulsive decision. I see, I said simply, waiting for them to reach the point, the real reason for this carefully orchestrated meeting. Emily exchanged a glance with David, then continued. We're so excited about this opportunity, but we've hit a small snag with the financing. Small snag? I repeated. David jumped in. The bank requires a larger down payment than we anticipated. With Emily's promotion and my upcoming project bonus, we'll have the funds in a few months. but the sellers need to close in 3 weeks. So you need a loan, I stated plainly, cutting through the pretense. Relief flashed across David's face at my directness. Yes, just a short-term loan. We'll pay you back as soon as— How much? I asked. Another glance between them. Emily's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. 200,000. The amount hung in the air between us. It wasn't a small sum by any measurement, and certainly not one to be repaid in a few months, regardless of promotions or project bonuses. That's a substantial down payment, I observed. I thought banks were offering loans with as little as 3% down these days. Emily's smile didn't waver. The rates are more favorable with 20% down. It's financially savvy, in the long run. What she didn't say, what neither of them would admit, was that their credit scores likely disqualified them from those favorable terms. Years of missed payments and maxed-out credit cards had consequences, despite their attempts to maintain the illusion of prosperity. I took a moment to consider my response, studying my son's face. David had Robert's eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold when caught in the right light. But where Robert's eyes had reflected honesty and integrity, David's held a desperation. That pained me. Somewhere along the way, my son had lost himself in Emily's vision of success, a vision built on appearance rather than substance. I'll need to think about it, I said finally. $200,000 is not a decision I can make on the spot. Emily's smile faltered. The sellers have other interested parties. We need to secure the financing quickly. Then perhaps you should explore other options, I suggested. Home equity loans, retirement account loans. We've looked into those, David interrupted. The timelines don't work. Mom, this is a golden opportunity. The market in that area is exploding. In 5 years, the property could be worth double. I'd heard similar promises before. The can't-miss investment that had lost them $30,000. The guaranteed return business venture that had collapsed within 6 months. The perfect rental property that had stood vacant for a year before they'd sold it at a loss. As I said, I need time to consider, I repeated firmly. Financial decisions of this magnitude require careful thought. Emily's facade finally cracked. What's there to think about? You're sitting on that house that's way too big for just you, plus whatever Robert left you. It's not like you're using the money. The callousness of her statement momentarily stunned me into silence. David looked mortified. Emily, he hissed, that's not— It's fine, David, I said, gathering my composure. Emily's entitled to her opinion. I stood, smoothing my skirt with practiced dignity. I'll review my finances and let you know my decision in a few days. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a commitment this afternoon. David jumped up. Mom, wait, Emily didn't mean— Yes, she did, I interrupted gently. And that's okay. Clarity is important when financial matters are involved. Emily remained, seated, her expression a mixture of frustration and calculation. I knew she was already formulating a new approach, a different angle to extract what she wanted. I'll see myself out, I said, moving toward the door before either of them could respond. As I drove home, my hands gripped the steering wheel with unnecessary force. Emily's words echoed in my mind. It's not like you're using the money. As if the years of hard work and careful saving that Robert and I had done were merely a convenience for David and Emily to exploit. As if my financial security was somehow unjustified because I lived alone in the house where I'd raised my family. The beautiful spring day seemed at odds with my turbulent thoughts. Cherry blossoms lined the streets of our neighborhood, their delicate pink petals swirling in the breeze. Robert and I had planted our own cherry tree in the backyard the year David was born. It still bloomed faithfully each spring, a living memorial to the life we'd built together. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my neighbor Grace working in her garden. She waved, and I found myself walking over instead of going inside. Grace had moved in 5 years ago after her own husband passed away. Over time, we'd developed a friendship based on shared experiences and mutual respect. "You look like you could use a glass of lemonade," she observed, removing her gardening gloves. "Bad day?" "Complicated," I replied with a sigh. "Family matters." Grace nodded knowingly. "The most complicated kind. Come sit." We settled on her porch, and I found myself recounting the entire interaction with David and Emily. Grace listened without interruption, her weathered face thoughtful. 200,000, she whistled when I finished. "That's not a loan, that's a gift. They don't intend to pay it back." "I know," I admitted, "just like they haven't repaid any of the other loans over the years." "So why are you even considering it?" Grace asked bluntly. Her question caught me off guard. Why was I considering it? Out of habit? Obligation? The desperate hope that this time would be different? "He's my son," I said finally. "My only child." Grace's expression softened. "Margaret, being a good mother doesn't mean being an ATM. Sometimes love means saying no." Her words stayed with me as I returned home and settled into Robert's old study, now my office. The room had changed over the years. Lighter curtains, a more comfortable chair, my watercolor supplies arranged neatly on the side table. But Robert's presence remained in the books lining the shelves and the old globe in the corner. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and removed a leather-bound ledger. Robert had been meticulous about tracking our finances, a habit I'd continued after his death. Every loan to David and Emily was recorded there in black and white. Dates, amounts, supposed purposes, promised repayment timelines. None had been repaid in full. Most hadn't been repaid at all. The total was staggering, nearly 100. And $73,000 over 8 years. Add the requested $200,000, and we'd be approaching $400,000. Almost $500,000 poured into the black hole of David and Emily's financial mismanagement. I closed the ledger and leaned back in my chair, trying to imagine what Robert would say in this situation. He'd been firm but fair with David growing up, setting clear boundaries and expectations. When had those boundaries dissolved? When had I stopped being a parent and become a resource to be exploited? My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, I'm sorry about today. Emily was out of line. Can we talk tomorrow?" As I considered my response, another text arrived. "The sellers need an answer by Friday. Please, Mom. This is important." The desperation in his messages confirmed what I already knew. They had no backup plan. They'd made an offer they couldn't afford, assuming I would cover the shortfall as I always had. Instead of replying immediately, I opened my laptop and searched for the property listing. The Tudor house on Lakeside Drive appeared on my screen, its stone facade and sweeping waterfront views undeniably beautiful. But the listing confirmed my suspicions. Needs TLC, great potential for the right buyer, sold as is, all real. Estate euphemisms for serious problems. I searched further, finding the property tax records and history. The Hendersons had purchased the house 40 years ago for $95,000. Today's asking price reflected decades of lakefront property appreciation, but the house itself had not been substantially updated since the 1980s. The investment potential David and Emily envisioned would require significant capital beyond the purchase price, capital they didn't have. Next, I searched for rental properties in the area. If their plan was to generate income through vacation rentals, they'd be facing stiff competition from professionally managed properties with modern amenities and excellent reviews. The likelihood of them recouping their investment, let alone profiting, seemed increasingly slim. By the time I finished my research, evening had fallen. I made myself a simple dinner and ate in the kitchen, surrounded by memories of family meals, when David was growing up. How had we gone from those warm, connective moments to this transactional relationship? After dinner, I called my financial advisor, Richard, who had helped manage our investments since before Robert's death. "Margaret," he greeted me warmly. How are you? It's been a while since we've checked in. I'm well, Richard. I'm calling because I need some perspective on a potential investment. I outlined the situation without specifically mentioning David and Emily, describing it instead as a family member seeking funds for a lakefront property investment. Richard listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions about the property condition, location, and proposed terms. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. Margaret, based on what you've described, this sounds like a high-risk venture with limited upside potential. The property requires substantial renovation, the local rental market is saturated, and the proposed repayment timeline is optimistic at best. So you wouldn't recommend it as an investment? I pressed. Not for someone in your position, no, he said firmly. Your portfolio is balanced and secure. It provides the income you need while preserving capital. This proposal would introduce unnecessary risk and potentially jeopardize your financial security. And if it were a loan rather than an investment? Richard chuckled. In my experience, mixing family and loans rarely ends well. If you decide to provide the funds, I'd suggest treating it as a gift, money you don't expect to see again. That way, if it is repaid, it's a pleasant surprise rather than a source of ongoing tension. His advice confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about the lake house or investment opportunities. It was about establishing boundaries that should have been in place years ago. I thanked Richard and ended the call, then spent the evening reviewing my financial records once more. The truth was, I could provide the money David and Emily wanted. Robert's life insurance, our savings, and prudent investments had left me in a comfortable position. But comfortable didn't mean unlimited, and it certainly didn't mean I should continue enabling David and Emily's financial irresponsibility. Before bed, I finally replied to David's text. Let's meet tomorrow, my house, 11 a.m. His response came immediately. Thank you, Mom. We'll be there. I prepared carefully for their visit the next morning. I made coffee, set out some simple store-bought cookies, and arranged my paperwork on the dining room table. The ledger sat prominently in the center, along with printouts of the lake house listing and my notes from the conversation with Richard. They arrived precisely at 11, Emily wearing what I recognized as her business negotiation outfit, a sleek black dress with subtle gold accessories. David looked nervous, fidgeting with his watch as they sat down at the table. Thank you for seeing us, Margaret, Emily began. I want to apologize for yesterday. My comment about the money was inappropriate and insensitive. Her apology sounded rehearsed, and her eyes kept drifting to the ledger on the table. I appreciate that, Emily, I said, pouring coffee for each of us. And thank you both for coming. I've given a lot of thought to your request. David leaned forward eagerly. And? Before I give you my decision, I'd like to review something with you. I opened the ledger and turned it toward them. This is a record of all the financial assistance your father and I have provided over the years. David's expression changed from eagerness to discomfort. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. Mom, is this really necessary? We know you've helped us out. Yes, it is necessary, I said firmly. The total amount, as you can see, is $173,452. None of these loans has been fully repaid. Emily crossed her arms defensively. We've been building our careers, establishing ourselves. These things take time and investment. I understand that, I said, but they also require accountability. Each time you've asked for money, there's been a promise to repay, a timeline that's never been met. Before I consider providing an additional $200,000, I need to understand how this time will be different. David shifted uncomfortably. Mom, this isn't a handout. It's an investment opportunity we're including you in. The property value alone. I've researched the property, I interrupted, sliding the printouts toward them. It needs approximately $300,000 in renovations to be marketable as either a residence or a rental. The electrical system is outdated. The foundation has issues, and according to the disclosure statement, there's significant water damage in the basement. Emily's confidence visibly faltered. Our inspector didn't mention— Did you have an independent inspection? I asked. Or did you rely on the seller's disclosure? Their silence answered my question. Furthermore, I continued, the rental market in that area is highly competitive. To generate the income you're projecting, you'd need to invest in high-end fixtures and furnishings, professional photography, sophisticated booking software, and likely a property management service. Have you budgeted for those expenses? David ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. We have some savings set aside for renovations. How much? I asked directly. More uncomfortable silence. David, Emily, I said, softening my tone. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to understand the full picture before committing such a large sum of money. Emily finally spoke, her voice tight with suppressed frustration. We have about $30,000 for initial renovations. My year-end bonus should cover more, and we plan to do some of the work ourselves to save on costs. $30,000 wouldn't cover even the basic structural issues, let alone the cosmetic updates they envisioned. And neither David nor Emily had any renovation experience beyond painting a wall. I see, I said. And the down payment? You're asking for $200,000. What percentage of the purchase price is that? David cleared his throat. It's about 23%. The purchase price is $875,000. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. And what are the terms of the mortgage you've been approved for? Another exchange of glances. Emily spoke carefully. We're still finalizing the details with the bank. So you don't actually have mortgage approval yet? I clarified. It's preliminary approval, David amended. The final terms depend on the down payment amount. I closed the ledger and folded my hands on top of it. David, Emily, I've given this a great deal of thought. I've consulted with my financial advisor and considered all aspects of your proposal. I've decided that I cannot provide the $200,000 you're requesting. The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Emily recovered first, her expression hardening. Is this because of what I said yesterday? Because I apologized for that. No, I said firmly. This is because it would be financially irresponsible for all of us. The property requires far more investment than you've planned for. You don't have secure mortgage approval, and frankly, your history of repaying loans doesn't inspire confidence. David looked stunned. Mom, we've never not paid you back. I tapped the ledger. According to my records, you've repaid approximately $7,000 of the $173,000 you've borrowed. That's about 4%. But those were different circumstances, he protested. Small loans for emergencies or opportunities. This is a solid investment. It's a speculative investment at best, I corrected. And my decision stands. I won't be providing the funds. Emily stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I knew this was a waste of time. I told you she wouldn't understand. Emily, David cautioned, reaching for her arm. She shook him off. No, I'm done pretending. Your mother has never approved of me, never thought I was good enough for you. And now she's using money to control us, to punish me. That's not true, I said calmly. This isn't about approval or punishment. It's about responsibility, mine and yours. Emily gathered her purse, her movements sharp with anger. Come on, David. We can find the money elsewhere. David hesitated, torn between his wife and his mother. Mom, please reconsider. This property is perfect. We might not get another opportunity like this. Perhaps that's for the best, I suggested gently. Sometimes the opportunities we miss are blessings in disguise. Emily scoffed. Spare us the fortune cookie wisdom. Let's go, David. To his credit, my son didn't immediately follow his wife to the door. He looked at me with genuine distress. Mom, I don't want to leave like this. Can we talk more about this? Of course, I said, but my decision about the loan is final. Emily called from the entryway. David, now! He stood reluctantly. I'll call you, he promised, before following his wife out the door. After they left, I sat in the quiet of my dining room, emotions washing over me in waves, sadness, regret, but also a surprising sense of relief. For years, I'd been enabling their financial irresponsibility, hoping that one day they'd learn from their mistakes. Today, I'd finally drawn a line. I returned the ledger to Robert's study and stood for a moment looking at his photograph on the desk. I think you would have done the same, I told his smiling image, though perhaps with more tact. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. I expected angry calls or texts, but none came. By evening, the silence had become concerning. Enough that I sent a brief message to David. I hope you're okay. I love you. No response. That night, I slept fitfully, my dreams filled with fragmented images of David as a child, reaching for my hand, then pulling away. When morning came, I felt drained but resolute. I had made the right decision, even if it cost me my relationship with my son in the short term. 3 days passed without any contact from David or Emily. I went about my routine, volunteering at the library, attending my book club, working in my garden, but their absence weighed on me. On the 4th day, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, David stood alone on the porch, looking haggard but determined. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Of course. We sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. David looked around, his gaze landing on the family photographs arranged on the bookshelf, images of happier times when our relationships weren't defined by financial transactions. I'm sorry about the other day, he finally said. Emily was upset. We both were. I understand, I said. Disappointment can be difficult to process. He nodded, then took a deep breath. You were right, about all of it. We don't have mortgage approval. We were counting on your money to secure favorable terms. Without it, the rates they're offering are prohibitive. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. And the inspection, he continued. It was cursory at best. After you raised those concerns, I hired an independent inspector to take a closer look. The issues are even worse than you thought. The foundation alone would cost over $100,000 to repair properly. Relief washed over me. He had listened. He had checked for himself rather than taking Emily's optimistic view at face value. I'm sorry the property wasn't what you hoped, I said sincerely. I know how disappointing that must be. David looked down at his hands. Emily's still angry. She thinks we could have made it work, that you sabotaged our opportunity because you don't approve of her. That's not. I know, he interrupted. I know that's not true, but Emily, she has certain expectations about lifestyle, about what success looks like. When reality doesn't match those expectations, she struggles. I chose my next words carefully. David, your father and I raised you to understand the difference between wants and needs, between appearance and substance. Somewhere along the way, it seems those distinctions have become blurred for you. He didn't deny it. Emily's world is different. Her family has always focused on status, on keeping up appearances. I got caught up in that, in wanting to provide the lifestyle she expected. At what cost? I asked gently. David sighed heavily. Our credit scores are in the toilet. We're maxed out on credit cards. The luxury car is 3 months behind on payments. If I'm being completely honest, we're drowning. The admission hung between us, painful but necessary. For the first time in years, my son was being truthful about his financial situation. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "That can't have been easy." "It wasn't," he admitted. "But after what happened, after looking at that ledger and realizing how much we've already taken, I had to face reality." "What will you do now?" I asked. He squared his shoulders, looking more like his father than I'd seen in years. "We've withdrawn our offer on the lake house. I've started looking into financial counseling services. Emily's resistant, but I've made it clear this isn't optional. We need help." Pride swelled in my chest. This was the son I'd raised, responsible, capable of acknowledging mistakes and taking steps to correct them. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. "Professional guidance can make a significant difference." David hesitated, then continued. "I've also started looking at our budget. Really looking at it. The car has to go. We're considering downsizing our apartment. It's going to be a difficult adjustment for Emily, but it's necessary." "These changes won't be easy," I acknowledged, "but they're important steps toward financial health." He nodded, then looked at me directly. "Mom, I want to start repaying what we've borrowed. Not all at once. I know that's not possible right now, but systematically, with a real plan. Even if it's just a small amount each month to start. I want to honor those obligations." Tears pricked at my eyes. This was more meaningful than any apology could have been. A concrete acknowledgement of responsibility and a commitment to change. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We can work out a reasonable payment. Plan once you've met with the financial counselor and have a better understanding of your budget." David seemed to relax slightly, as if a burden had been lifted. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for saying no when it would have been easier to say yes." "That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We do what's best for our children, even when it's difficult, even when they don't understand or appreciate it at the time." He smiled slightly. "Dad would have handled this better. He would have seen through our plan immediately." I laughed softly. "Your father was direct, that's certain. But he believed in learning from mistakes, not avoiding them altogether. He would be proud of you for taking these steps now." David glanced at his watch. "I should go. Emily's expecting me back." "How are things between you?" I asked carefully. He sighed. "Tense. This situation has brought up some fundamental differences in how we view money, success, family. We have work to do." I nodded, understanding all too well how financial stress could strain a marriage. Robert and I had weathered our own challenges in the early years. "Marriage is a partnership," I said. "It requires compromise, communication, shared goals. It's not always easy, but it's worth the effort." David stood, and I walked him to the door. Before leaving, he turned and embraced me. A real hug, not the perfunctory gesture he'd offered in recent years. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm sorry we've taken you for granted." I held him tightly. This grown man who would always be my little boy in some corner of my heart. "I love you too. Always have. Always will." As I watched him drive away, I felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Habits and attitudes were difficult to change, and Emily's cooperation remained uncertain. But today, a first step had been taken. A boundary had been established and respected. A truth had been acknowledged. I returned to my garden, finding comfort in the simple act of tending to growing things. Some plants thrived with constant attention and care, while others needed space and independence to develop strong roots. Perhaps the same was true of children. Perhaps by stepping back, by refusing to be merely a financial resource, I had given David the opportunity to grow in ways that continued support would have prevented. Only time would tell if today's revelations would lead to lasting change. But for now, as I knelt in the soft earth among the blooming flowers Robert and I had planted together years ago, I felt a sense of peace. I had done the right thing, the necessary thing. I had been a mother, not a bank, and in that moment, that was enough. I found myself standing at Emily and David's front door 2 weeks after our confrontation over the lake house loan. This time, I hadn't been invited. I'd driven across town on impulse after receiving a call from Marianne Peterson, an old friend who worked at the bank where David and Emily kept their accounts. Under normal circumstances, Marianne would never breach confidentiality, but what she'd witnessed had disturbed her enough to make an exception. "Margaret, I shouldn't be telling you this," she'd said, her voice low and concerned over the phone. "But as a friend, I think you need to know. Emily was just here, trying to take out a high-interest loan using your house as collateral. She had papers she claimed you'd signed, authorizing her to use your property as security." My blood had run cold. "I never signed anything like that." "I know," Marianne had replied. "The signatures didn't match our records. When I questioned her about it, she stormed out. 'Margaret, I think she forged your signature.'" Now, standing on their doorstep with my heart pounding, I wondered if I was making a mistake by confronting them directly. Perhaps I should have gone to my lawyer first, or even the police. But some part of me needed to hear their explanation, to give my son one last chance to do the right thing. I rang the doorbell, listening to the hollow chimes echo through their house. No response. I rang again, then knocked firmly. Finally, I heard movement inside. The door opened to reveal David, unshaven and bleary-eyed, wearing wrinkled clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping in them. "Mom?" His surprise seemed genuine. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "May I come in?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder into the house. "Now's not really a good time." "It's important, David." I met his eyes firmly. "It's about the forged documents Emily tried to use at First National Bank this morning." His face drained of color. Without another word, he stepped aside to let me enter. The house was in disarray. Empty takeout containers littered the coffee. Table mail was scattered across the floor, and there was a distinct odor of neglect in the air. This wasn't the meticulously staged home I'd visited before. This was what desperation looked like when the facades crumbled. "Where's Emily?" I asked, remaining standing despite David's half-hearted gesture toward the couch. "She's not here," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "She left a few hours ago. We had an argument." "About the forgery?" I pressed. David's shoulders slumped. He seemed to age 10 years in an instant. "So it's true. She actually went through with it." "You knew?" The betrayal cut deeper than I'd anticipated. "No, yes, not exactly." He paced the living room, agitated. "She mentioned it as a possibility. I told her it was insane, illegal. I thought I'd talked her out of it." I wanted to believe him. The little boy who'd once possessed such a clear sense of right and wrong couldn't have fallen this far. But the evidence suggested otherwise. "David, this is serious. Forgery, attempted fraud. These are criminal offenses." "I know," he snapped, then immediately softened. "I know. Everything's falling apart, Mom. After you refused the loan for the lake house, things between us." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the chaos surrounding us. "Tell me what's happening," I said, softening my tone. "All of it." David sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "My firm is downsizing. I've been put on notice, 3 months. Then my position is eliminated. Emily doesn't know yet. I've been afraid to tell her." "Why?" He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Because our entire life is built on appearances. The right address, the right car, the right vacations. When I first met Emily, I was impressed by her confidence, her ambition. I wanted to be part of her world, to give her everything she wanted. At any cost, I observed quietly. Yeah, he admitted. At any cost. Including lying to her about our financial situation, maxing out credit cards to maintain the illusion, borrowing money from you without any real plan to repay it. I finally sat down beside him, maintaining some distance but close enough to show I was listening. And the lake house? Was that Emily's idea or yours? Hers initially, he said, but I went along with it. Convinced myself it could solve our problems, generate rental income, give us somewhere to escape the pressure. I knew it was a long shot, but I was desperate. And now? Now I'm more desperate than ever. He laughed hollowly. The credit? Card companies are calling daily. The car was repossessed last week. Emily's talking about moving in with her parents, but she doesn't want them to know how bad things really are. So she decided that forging my signature was the solution? My voice hardened despite my efforts to remain calm. David shook his head. It wasn't like that. I mean, it was wrong, completely wrong. But in her mind, she was just expediting things. She convinced herself you'd come around eventually, that you were just being difficult to make a point. The casual dismissal of my boundaries was so typical of Emily's attitude toward me that I almost laughed. Almost. Does she understand that she could go to jail for this? David's face paled further. Please, Mom, don't press charges. She made a terrible mistake, but what? I interrupted, anger finally breaking through. But she's family? Funny how I'm suddenly family when it's convenient, when you need money, or when you need me to overlook criminal behavior. But I wasn't family when Emily excluded me from your promotion party, or when you both forgot my birthday last year, or when you canceled our Christmas plans at the last minute because something better came along. My words hung in the air between us, harsh but true. David didn't try to deny them. You're right, he said quietly. We've treated you terribly. I've let this happen. Let Emily dictate the terms of our relationship with you because it was easier than standing up to her. I've been a coward. His admission surprised me. It was the most honest he'd been in years. David, I don't want to see Emily arrested, or you. But this can't continue. You both need help, financial counseling at minimum, possibly therapy to address the underlying issues. Emily won't go for that, he said immediately. She doesn't believe in therapy, says it's for weak people. I raised an eyebrow. And how's her approach working out so far? He gave a defeated shrug. Fair point. The front door opened suddenly, and Emily swept in, her arms laden with shopping bags from expensive boutiques. She froze when she saw me, her expression cycling, rapidly from shock to guilt to defiance. Margaret, she said stiffly. What a surprise. The shopping bags told me everything I needed to know about her coping mechanisms. While their financial world crumbled around them, Emily's response was to spend money they didn't have on things they couldn't afford. Emily, I acknowledged. I was just discussing with David the matter of my forged signature at First National Bank this morning. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly, setting down her bags with deliberate care. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence, I said calmly. Marianne Peterson called me. She's known me for 30 years. Did you really think she wouldn't recognize a forged signature? Emily's composure slipped, her eyes darting to David. You told her? He didn't have to, I said. The bank called. Me directly. This was a small lie. Marianne had called as a friend, not in any official capacity, but I wanted to protect her from Emily's wrath. So what now? Emily demanded, her voice brittle. You're here to threaten me? To tell David? What a terrible person I am. I'm here, I said carefully, because I'm concerned. For both of you. Forgery is serious, Emily. It's not something I can simply overlook. Of course not, she said bitterly. You've never approved of me. You've been waiting for an opportunity like this. That's not true, I protested. I've tried for years to build a relationship with you, but you've kept me at arm's length, included me only when it served your purposes. Because you judge everything I do. Emily's voice rose. The way I dress, the way I manage our home, the way I interact with David. Nothing is ever good enough for the saintly Margaret Wilson. I was taken aback by the vehemence of her response. Was that really how she saw me? As judgmental and disapproving? Emily, David interjected, that's not fair. Mom has been nothing but supportive of us. Supportive? Emily scoffed. Is that what you call refusing to help us with the lake house? Keeping track of every penny she's ever lent us in that ridiculous ledger? You mean the loans you've never repaid? I countered, my patience wearing thin. The money that disappeared into designer clothes and luxury vacations while you complained about not being able to afford a house? Emily's face contorted with anger. See? Judgmental. You have no idea what it's like trying to maintain appearances in our social circle. These aren't frivolous expenses. They're necessary investments in our image, our professional brand. Your professional brand, I repeated slowly. Is that more important than your integrity, your financial security, your relationship with family? Don't lecture me about family, Emily snapped. You've never treated me like family. I've always been an outsider, the woman who took your precious son away. The accusation stung, partly because there was a kernel of truth in it. I had struggled initially when David first brought Emily home, not because she wasn't good enough, but because her values seemed so different from those we'd raised David with. But I had tried to overcome those reservations, to welcome her despite our differences. That's not true, I said quietly. I've made every effort to include you, to respect your place in David's life. But respect goes both ways, Emily. And lately, it seems like I'm only family when you need something from me. Oh, please, Emily rolled her eyes, like you don't use your poor widow status to manipulate David's guilt whenever it suits you. Emily? David looked horrified. That's enough. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever doubts I'd had about my decision to confront them directly were gone. The situation was even worse than I'd feared. I think, I said carefully, that we all need some time to cool down and consider our options. What options? Emily demanded. Are you going to the police? Is that your threat? It's not a threat, I clarified. It's a reality you created when you committed forgery. But no, I haven't gone to the police yet. I wanted to hear your side first to give you a chance to explain. How magnanimous, Emily muttered. David stood up, his posture straightening with what looked like resolve. Emily, stop. Mom is right. What you did was wrong. Illegal. We need to face the consequences of our actions, not attack her for pointing them out. Emily stared at him, in disbelief. Whose side are you on? This isn't about sides, he said firmly. It's about right and wrong, and we've been wrong about a lot of things. It's time to face reality. Something in his tone must have reached her because Emily's aggressive stance faltered. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain, vulnerable even. What does that mean? She asked, her voice smaller now. David looked at me, then back at his wife. It means we need help. Professional help. Financial counseling. At minimum, possibly more. It means we need to stop living beyond our means. Stop pretending we're something we're not. And if I refuse? Emily challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. David's response was quiet but firm. Then you'll be refusing alone. I can't do this anymore, Em. The lying, the pretending, the constant stress of maintaining appearances. We can't afford. It's killing me. The raw honesty in his voice seemed to penetrate Emily's defenses. She sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "What about the forgery?" she asked, addressing me directly for the first time, without hostility. "Are you going to report me?" I considered my options carefully. The rational part of me knew that reporting Emily's crime might be the wake-up call they both needed, but the mother in me couldn't bear the thought of contributing to their further downfall. "That depends," I said finally. "I'm willing to handle this privately, but only under certain conditions." "What conditions?" Emily asked warily. "First, you both agree to financial counseling, real counseling with a certified professional, not just a budget app or online course. Second, you commit to a repayment plan for the existing loans, even if it's just a small amount each month. Third, complete transparency about your finances going forward. No more secrets, no more pretenses." David nodded immediately. "That's more than fair." Emily hesitated, her pride visibly warring with her self-preservation instincts. "And if we agree to these conditions, you won't go to the police about the incident at the bank?" "I won't," I confirmed. "But Emily, this is your only chance. If anything like this happens again, I won't hesitate to take legal action." She nodded slowly, defeated. "I understand." The tension in the room eased slightly, though the air remained thick with unspoken emotions. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the confrontation. "I should go," I said. "You two have a lot to discuss." David walked me to the door, stepping outside with me onto the porch. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for everything. For letting things get this bad, for not standing up to Emily sooner, for taking you for granted." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw both the boy he had been and the man he was struggling to become. "I know, David, but apologies aren't enough anymore. I need to see real change." "You will," he promised. "I'm going to fix this, all of it." I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, I still wanted to believe in my son. "I hope so," I said, "for both your sakes." As I drove home, a storm of emotions swirled within me. Anger, disappointment, concern, and underneath it all, a stubborn, persistent love that refused to be extinguished despite years of neglect and exploitation. Parenting, I reflected, didn't end when a child reached adulthood. It just became more complicated, the boundaries less clear. When I arrived home, I went straight to Robert's study and sank into his chair, wishing as I had so many times since his death that he were here to offer guidance. What would he have done in this situation? Would he have reported Emily's forgery? Walked away from the relationship entirely? Found some middle ground as I was attempting to do? I had no answers, only a profound weariness and the sense that the path forward would be neither straight nor easy. The next morning, I called Marianne at the bank to thank her for the warning and assure her that the situation was being addressed privately. I asked her not to report the incident officially, at least for now. "Are you sure, Margaret?" she asked, concerned. What Emily did was a serious offense. "I'm sure," I said. "They're both in a fragile state right now. I think legal consequences would push them over the edge rather than help them recover." "You're being more forgiving than I would be," Marianne observed. Was I being forgiving or simply enabling more bad behavior? The line seemed increasingly blurry. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But their family. Complicated, flawed family." After hanging up, I made another call, this one to Richard Anderson, a financial counselor highly recommended by my own financial advisor. I explained the situation in general terms and asked if he would be willing to work with David and Emily. "These cases can be challenging," Richard warned me, especially when the financial issues are entangled with family dynamics and emotional patterns. Both parties have to be fully committed to the process for it to succeed. I understand, I said, but they need help, and I believe they're ready to receive it. Then I'd be happy to meet with them, he agreed. But Margaret, I want to be clear about something. My loyalty will be to my clients, your son and daughter-in-law. I won't be reporting back to you about their finances or our discussions. I wouldn't expect you to, I assured him. I just want them to get the help they need. After arranging an initial consultation for the following week, I texted David with the details. His response was immediate and grateful. Thank you, Mom. We'll be there. Both of us. It was a small step, but perhaps a significant one. The days that followed were quiet. I didn't hear from either David or Emily, which was both a relief and a worry. Were they actually discussing their options, making plans, facing reality? Or was Emily already convincing David to backtrack on his commitments, to find another way to maintain their unsustainable lifestyle? I tried to focus on my own life, on the activities and relationships that brought me joy. I worked in my garden, attended my book club, volunteered at the library's literacy program. I had lunch with Grace and shared the latest developments, appreciating her unvarnished perspective. You're making the right call, she assured me over soup and salad at our favorite cafe. Reporting Emily might have felt satisfying in the moment, but it wouldn't have solved the underlying issues. I hope you're right, I said. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being a pushover, allowing them to manipulate me again. Grace shook her head firmly. Setting conditions isn't being a pushover, Margaret. It's establishing boundaries. The key is sticking to them, even when it gets difficult. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that compassion and boundaries weren't mutually exclusive. I could choose mercy over justice in this particular instance while still maintaining the boundaries I'd established. The day of David and Emily's appointment with Richard Anderson arrived. I found myself checking my phone. Throughout the day, hoping for some update, some confirmation that they'd followed through. By evening, when I'd heard nothing, I began to worry that my hopes had been misplaced. Then, just as I was preparing for bed, my doorbell rang. Puzzled and a bit concerned given the late hour, I peered through the peephole to find David standing, alone on my porch. I opened the door, noting his improved appearance, clean-shaven, neatly dressed, though still carrying the weight of stress in the set of his shoulders. David, is everything okay? Can I come in for a minute? He asked. I know it's late, but I wanted to talk to you in person. I stepped aside to let him enter, leading him to the living room where we sat across from each other. We went to see Richard Anderson today, David began without preamble. Emily was resistant at first, but she came around. It was illuminating. In what way? I asked cautiously. He had us list all our debts, all our monthly expenses versus income. Seeing it all laid out like that, in black and white. David shook his head. It was overwhelming. We're much worse off than even I realized. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. But recognizing the problem is the first step toward solving it. That's what Richard said, David agreed. He's helped us create a preliminary plan, strict budgeting, debt consolidation, selling assets we don't need. It's going to be a long road, but it's a start. And Emily, how did she take it? David sighed. It was hard for her. Is hard for her. Her identity is so wrapped up in appearances, in the lifestyle she thinks we should have. But I think today was a reality check she couldn't ignore. That's encouraging, I said carefully, not wanting to seem too pessimistic, but also wary of false hope. There's something else, David continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out an envelope. This is for you. I took the envelope, opening it to find a check for $500. It's not much, David acknowledged, Not compared to what we owe you, but it's a start. We've committed to paying you $500 every month until the debt is cleared. Richard helped us build it into our budget as a non-negotiable expense. The amount was modest compared to the total debt, but the gesture itself was significant. This wasn't a vague promise for the future. It was a concrete action, a tangible commitment. "Thank you," I said, emotion thickening my voice. "This means a lot, David." "It's the least we can do," he replied. "Literally, the least. I wish it could be more." "It will be eventually," I assured him. "One step at a time." David nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Emily and I have been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of talking since your visit. About our relationship with you, about the way we've treated you." "And?" I prompted when he paused. "And we owe you an apology, a real one, not just words." Emily's understanding of family is complicated. Her own parents' relationship is based on transactions, appearances. Love was conditional growing up for her, but that's not an excuse for how she's treated you. "What about you?" I asked. "What's your excuse?" David looked genuinely pained. "I don't have one. I allowed myself to be influenced by Emily's attitudes, to prioritize her demands over our relationship. I forgot the values you and Dad taught me. I became someone I'm not proud of." His honesty was refreshing, if painful to hear. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said. "It means more than you might think." "We'd like to try again," David said hesitantly, "to rebuild our relationship. Not just because of the money or the forgery situation, but because you're my mother. Because family should be more than a word we use when it's convenient." I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Instead, I saw only genuine remorse and hope. "I'd like that," I said finally. "But it will take time, David. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired." "I know," he nodded. "We're prepared for that. We're willing to put in the work, to earn back your trust." "What about Emily?" I asked. "Is she really on board with this? Or is this coming primarily from you?" David considered the question thoughtfully. "She's trying. It's not easy for her to admit she was wrong, to show vulnerability. But I think she understands now that the way we've been living, the way we've been treating you, isn't sustainable." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "For all our sakes." We talked a while longer, discussing practical aspects of their financial recovery plan and tentative ideas for rebuilding our family relationship. When David finally left, I felt a cautious optimism taking root. The next morning, I received a text from an unexpected source. "Emily." It was brief but significant. "Thank you for the second chance. I'm sorry for everything, especially the forgery. I know words aren't enough, but they're a start." It wasn't a lengthy apology or a profound admission, but from Emily, who had never before acknowledged any wrongdoing on her part, it represented a small breakthrough. I replied simply, "Thank you, Emily, one day at a time." Over the following weeks, small changes began to accumulate. David called more regularly, not just when they needed something, but to check in, to share updates about their progress with financial counseling, to ask about my activities and interests. Emily remained more reserved, but she made efforts, joining David on speakerphone during his calls, sending the occasional text with a question or comment that wasn't financial in nature. True to their word, a check for $500 arrived each month, accompanied by a brief note detailing their progress on paying down other debts, adjusting their lifestyle, rebuilding their financial foundation. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, when Emily's pride bristled against their new circumstances, when David's resolve wavered in the face of her discontent. But they kept trying, kept showing up for counseling sessions, kept honoring their financial commitments, and I kept my boundaries firm but not rigid, offering support without enabling, compassion without capitulation. It was a delicate balance, one I didn't always maintain perfectly. But like them, I kept trying. 3 months after the forgery incident, I received an invitation that surprised me, a dinner at their home, just the 3 of us. The invitation specified casual attire and home-cooked meal, both significant departures from their previous entertainment style. When I arrived that evening, the contrast with my previous visits was stark. The house was clean but not staged, comfortable rather than showy. The dining table was set simply with everyday dishes, not the expensive china they'd once used to impress guests. And the aroma coming from the kitchen suggested actual cooking rather than catered food pretending to be homemade. Emily greeted me at the door, her appearance noticeably different. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Margaret," she said, her smile, small but seemingly genuine. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, handing her a small potted herb plant I'd brought as a hostess gift. "Fresh basil for your kitchen." She accepted it with apparent appreciation. "This is perfect, actually. I've been trying to cook more at home, and herbs make such a difference." David emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. "Mom, you're right on time. The lasagna's almost ready." "You made lasagna?" I asked, surprised. David had never shown much interest in cooking. "Well, Emily did most of the work," he admitted. "But I helped with the sauce. Sort of." Emily rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "He stirred it once and claimed credit, but he did make the salad all by himself, so there's that." Their easy banter, the genuine warmth between them, suggested a shift in their relationship as well as their lifestyle. Financial stress could destroy a marriage or strengthen it. Apparently, they were working toward the latter. The meal was simple but delicious: homemade lasagna, salad, and garlic bread, with store-bought tiramisu for dessert. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, touching on work, hobbies, current events, and yes, their ongoing financial recovery. "Richard thinks we'll be debt-free in about 4 years, David explained as we enjoyed our dessert. "Excluding the mortgage, which we've refinanced at a better rate." "That's wonderful progress," I said sincerely. "You should be proud of yourselves." Emily nodded, a hint of her old confidence returning, but tempered now with humility. "It's been an adjustment. I won't pretend it's been easy. But there's something liberating about being honest about what we can and can't afford. I'm finding I don't miss the fancy restaurants and expensive vacations as much as I thought I would," David added. "They always came with this underlying stress, this knowledge that we couldn't really afford them but we're spending the money. Anyway, pretending is exhausting," I observed. "Living authentically within your means, there's a peace in that." Emily looked thoughtful. "I'm starting to understand that. My parents never got that. They're still on the hamster wheel, trying to keep up with their friends, impress people who probably don't even care." Her insight into her own family patterns suggested a level of self-reflection I hadn't previously associated with Emily. Perhaps the financial counseling was addressing more than just budgeting and debt repayment. As the evening drew to a close, Emily excused herself to make coffee, leaving David and me alone at the table. "This was nice?" I said. "Really nice." David smiled, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "It's a new chapter for all of us, I hope. We want you in our lives, Mom. Not as a financial safety net, but as family. Real family. The words I'd longed to hear for so many years. I squeezed his hand in return, emotion making it difficult to speak. I'd like that very much, I managed finally. When Emily returned with the coffee, she seemed to sense the emotional moment she'd interrupted. She set down the cups and took her seat, her expression unusually vulnerable. Margaret, she began hesitantly, I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. The way I've treated you, the forgery, all of it. I've been difficult. More than difficult. I've been entitled and disrespectful. Her direct acknowledgement took me by surprise. Thank you, Emily. That means a lot to me. I'm trying to understand why I behave that way, she continued. My therapist. She glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I'm seeing someone now, twice a month. She's helping me recognize some patterns from my childhood, some issues with my own parents that I've been projecting onto you. That's very insightful, I said, careful not to sound patronizing. Self-awareness is so important. Emily nodded. It's a work in progress, but I want you to know I'm committed to doing better, to being better. Not just for David or for our finances, but for myself, too. The sincerity in her voice, the humility in her expression, these were sides of Emily I'd never seen before. Perhaps they were sides that hadn't existed before, at least not consciously. I believe you, I said simply, and I'm here to support you both in whatever way is healthy and appropriate. As I drove home later that evening, a sense of cautious hope filled me. The road ahead would still have its challenges, its moments of doubt and difficulty. Trust, once broken, required time and consistent effort to rebuild. Old patterns had a way of reasserting themselves when stress or conflict arose. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. Like the concept of family was expanding beyond convenience and financial transactions to include respect, honesty, and genuine connection. Robert would have been proud, I thought as I pulled into my driveway. Proud of David for finding his way back to the values we'd raised him with. Proud of me for maintaining boundaries while offering second chances. Perhaps even proud of Emily for her willingness to examine her own behavior and commit to change. As I entered my home, my sanctuary, my own space, I felt a profound gratitude for the wisdom to say no when it mattered, for the compassion to offer another chance when it was warranted, for the strength to stand firm in my worth as a mother, as a person. Family wasn't a static concept, defined once and unchanging. It was a relationship, continually negotiated and renegotiated, shaped by choices both large and small. By saying no to being their personal bank, I had opened the door to becoming something far more valuable, a true and equal member of the family. Not just when it was convenient, not just when they needed something from me, but always. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But tonight, in this moment, that felt like enough. 6 months had passed since Emily's forgery attempt, and life had settled into a new rhythm. The monthly checks from David and Emily continued to arrive like clockwork, each one accompanied by a brief update on their progress. Their debt had decreased by nearly $30,000 through aggressive budgeting and selling off luxury items they couldn't afford. David had secured a more stable position at a smaller architectural firm after his previous company's downsizing. Emily had swallowed her pride and accepted a lateral move to a company with better long-term prospects but less prestige. Our relationship had improved cautiously, like a fragile plant slowly taking root. Sunday dinners had become a monthly tradition, simple, home-cooked meals that focused on connection rather than impression. Sometimes Emily participated fully, engaging in genuine conversation. Other times, she remained quiet and withdrawn, still struggling to reconcile her changed circumstances with her deeply ingrained need for status and validation. I had maintained my boundaries while opening my heart, a delicate balance that required constant vigilance. When they mentioned a weekend getaway they couldn't afford, I offered encouragement rather than my credit card. When Emily complained about having to drive an older model car, I sympathized without offering solutions. I was learning to be a mother, not a bank, a distinction that was healing our relationship rather than damaging it. Today, however, felt different. David had called last night, asking if he could stop by alone to discuss something important. The seriousness in his voice had triggered a familiar anxiety. Had they fallen back into old patterns? Were they facing new financial crises? Was he coming to ask for money despite all our progress? I busied myself in the garden, deadheading roses and pulling weeds while waiting for his arrival. Gardening had always been my therapy, the repetitive tasks allowing my mind to process concerns while my hands remained productive. Robert had often teased me about my garden thinking, claiming he could always tell when I had a problem to solve by how tidy the flower beds became. "Those must be some serious thoughts," David said, his voice startling me from my reverie. "The garden looks immaculate." I turned to find him standing at the edge of the patio, watching me with a small smile. He looked well, healthier than he had in years, the constant strain of financial deception no longer etching lines around his eyes. "Just keeping busy," I said, removing my gardening gloves and brushing soil from my knees. "Is everything all right?" "You sounded concerned on the phone." David nodded, his expression unreadable. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. Can we talk inside?" We settled at the kitchen table with glasses of iced tea. David seemed nervous, fidgeting with his glass, arranging and rearranging the coaster beneath it. "Mom," he finally began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the past year, about everything that happened with the lake house, the forgery, our finances." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "The financial counseling has been helpful. Obviously, we're making progress with our debt, learning to live within our means. But it's made me realize something else, something more important." "What's that?" I asked. "Money was never really the problem," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "It was a symptom of something deeper, the way I let go of my values, the way I prioritized appearances over substance, the way I treated you." His frankness surprised me. "That's very insightful, David." "It's taken a lot of reflection," he admitted, "and some therapy of my own. Not just the couples counseling with Emily, but individual sessions too." "I'm proud of you for doing that work," I said sincerely. "It takes courage to look at yourself honestly." David smiled faintly. "I had a good example in you. You've always been authentic, Mom, even when it wasn't comfortable or convenient." The compliment warmed me. For years, I'd wondered if my son saw me at all, really saw me beyond my utility as a financial safety net. "Anyway," he continued, "I've come to a decision, a personal one that I wanted to share with you before anyone else." My mind raced with possibilities. Was he leaving Emily? Changing careers? Moving away? "I've decided to start looking for Dad's old pocket watch." Of all the things I'd imagined he might say, this hadn't even made the list. Robert's gold pocket watch had been a family heirloom, passed down through 4 generations of Wilson men. It had disappeared shortly after his death, presumed lost in the chaos of grief and funeral arrangements. "David," I said carefully, "we searched everywhere for that watch. It's been gone for years." "I know," he nodded, "but I think I know what happened to it." Something in his expression, a mixture of shame and resolve, made my heart beat faster. "I took it," he said quietly. 3 years ago, when things were really bad financially, I pawned it for cash. The admission hit me like a physical blow. That watch had been Robert's most treasured possession, the one item he'd specifically wanted David to have after his death. It had represented not just monetary value, but the continuity of family, the passage of time, the connection between generations. "You sold your father's watch?" My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. David's eyes filled with tears. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd buy it back as soon as things improved. I convinced myself it was just a thing, not worth the stress of another missed mortgage payment. I sat in stunned silence, struggling to process this new betrayal. When I'd discovered the watch missing, I'd torn the house apart looking for it, convinced I'd misplaced it in my grief-addled state. I'd blamed myself for its loss, carried that guilt for years. "I'm so sorry, Mom," David continued, his voice breaking. It was the lowest point in a series of low points. I've never forgiven myself for it. "Does Emily know?" I asked, surprised by the calmness in my voice despite the storm of emotions inside. He shook his head. "No. It was before we were married. One of many financial secrets I kept from everyone, including her." "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. "After all this time?" "Because I'm going to find it and get it back," he said with determination. "I've been saving for months, setting aside a little from each paycheck. It's not enough yet, but I'm getting closer." "Do you even know where it is?" I asked. Pawn shops often sell items quickly if they're not reclaimed. "I've already started making inquiries," David explained. "The original shop closed down, but I've tracked the owner to another location across town. He remembers the watch, said it was distinctive enough that he held on to it longer than usual, hoping I'd come back for it." A tiny flicker of hope sparked within me. "And did he sell it eventually?" "Yes, to a collector of antique timepieces. The shop owner doesn't remember his name, but he thinks he was a regular customer. He's going through old records to see if he can find more information." I nodded slowly, absorbing this unexpected development. Part of me wanted to rage at David for his deception, for taking something so precious and treating it as just another asset to be liquidated when times got tough. But another part recognized the courage it took to confess, to open himself to my disappointment and anger in service of making amends. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," David said, filling the silence. "I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix this, to make it right if I can." I studied my son's face, the earnestness in his expression, the genuine remorse in his eyes. This wasn't the entitled young man who had expected bailouts and forgiveness without consequences. This was someone taking responsibility for his actions, facing their impact head-on. "The watch was your father's gift to you," I said finally. "He wanted you to have it." "I know," David nodded. "And I threw that away for a few $1,000s. It's one of my biggest regrets." When you find it," I said, choosing my words carefully, "it will be yours again, as your father intended. But David, the watch itself isn't what matters most. It's what it represents: integrity, responsibility, family heritage. Those are the things your father really wanted to pass on to you." "I understand that now," he said quietly. "Too late, maybe, but I understand. It's never too late to return to your values," I told him, reaching across the table to cover his hand with mine. "Your father would be proud of you for trying to make this right." Relief washed over David's features. "Thank you, Mom, for listening, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between us. It was another wound to heal, another betrayal to process, but also another step toward honesty and redemption. "There's something else," David said eventually. "Something I didn't plan to discuss today, but now seems important." "What is it?" I asked. "Emily and I have been talking about starting a family." The statement caught me off guard. With their financial situation still precarious and their marriage only recently stabilized, a child seemed like a complicated addition. "That's a big decision," I said carefully. "It is," David agreed. "And we're not rushing into it. We're working through our issues, strengthening our foundation first, but it's something we both want, eventually. And you're telling me this because, I prompted. Because I want to be the kind of father Dad was to me, David said simply. Steady, principled, loving. Before I can be that, I need to make peace with my own failures, make amends where possible. The sentiment touched me deeply. Despite everything, despite the disappointments and betrayals, my son was finding his way back to the core values we'd tried to instill in him. Your father wasn't perfect, I reminded him gently. None of us are, but he always tried to do the right thing, even when it was difficult, especially when it was difficult. That's what I'm trying to do now, David said. With the watch, with our finances, with our relationship. I want any children Emily and I might have to know their grandmother, to have what I had growing up, a sense of family that goes beyond obligation. I'd like that very much, I said, emotion thickening my voice. We talked for another hour, diving deeper into the practical aspects of his search for the watch, the progress of their financial recovery, their tentative plans for the future. When he finally left, I felt both drained and strangely energized, as if a wound had been lanced, allowing healing to begin. That evening, I found myself drawn to the photo albums stored in the guest room closet. I pulled out the one from David's childhood, settling on the couch to flip through pages of memories, birthday parties, school plays, camping trips with Robert. In one photo, David sat on his father's lap, both of them laughing as Robert showed him the pocket watch, its gold case gleaming in the sunlight. I traced the image with my fingertip, remembering that day clearly. David had been fascinated by the watch's mechanical workings, asking endless questions about how it kept time, why it needed winding, where it had come from. Robert had explained its history patiently, telling stories of his own father and grandfather, embedding the object with meaning far beyond its material value. Had David remembered those stories when he'd pawned the watch? Had he pushed them aside, prioritizing immediate financial relief over family legacy? Or had desperation simply narrowed his focus, making long-term values seem like luxuries he couldn't afford in that moment? I closed the album, not wanting to dwell on those questions. What mattered now was his commitment to making amends, to recovering not just the watch, but the values it represented. The following week brought an unexpected visit from Emily. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced and visibly nervous, fidgeting with her car keys as she stood on my doorstep. "Emily," I greeted her with genuine surprise. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, everything's fine," she assured me quickly. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. If that's okay?" It was a transparent excuse. My house wasn't in the neighborhood of anywhere Emily would typically go, but I appreciated the effort at casual connection. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. "I was just about to make some tea. Would you like some?" She nodded, following me to the kitchen with uncharacteristic hesitancy. This wasn't the confident, sometimes arrogant Emily I'd known for years. This was someone less certain, more vulnerable. As I prepared the tea, Emily wandered around my kitchen, studying the photographs on the refrigerator, the herbs growing in pots on the windowsill, the recipe cards filed in their wooden box. "Your kitchen is so homey," she observed. "Lived in, but organized. It feels peaceful." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the compliment. "I've always found cooking therapeutic." "My mother never cooked," Emily said absently, running a finger along the spice rack. "She said it was a waste of time when restaurants could do it better." Our kitchen was all stainless steel and marble, beautiful but never used. This small glimpse into her childhood explained so much about Emily's values, her emphasis on appearances over function, status over substance. I'd never considered how deeply her upbringing had shaped her approach to life, to marriage, to family. Different families have different priorities, I said neutrally, setting a mug of tea in front of her. Emily took a seat at the table, wrapping, her hands around the mug as if seeking its warmth despite the mild day. "David told you about the watch," she said abruptly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, he did." "I didn't know," she said quickly. "About him pawning it, I mean. He only told me last week." "I believe you," I assured her. "David said it happened before you were married." Emily nodded, staring into her tea. "He's been so different these past few months. More open, more honest. Not just with you, but with me too. He's sharing things he never talked about before." "That's a positive change," I observed. "It is," she agreed. "But it's also challenging. Learning about mistakes he made that I never knew about, seeing parts of him I didn't realize existed." "Marriage is like that," I said. "You never stop discovering new layers in your partner, even after years together." Emily looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Were you and Robert always honest with each other? Even about difficult things?" The question gave me pause. Robert and I had valued honesty in our marriage, but there had been moments of withholding, of protecting each other from uncomfortable truths. "We tried to be," I said carefully. "But honesty isn't always simple. Sometimes it's about timing, about finding the right way to share difficult information. What matters is the intention behind it. Whether you're hiding something to protect yourself or considering how to communicate it in a way that strengthens rather than damages your relationship." Emily absorbed this, nodding slowly. "David wants to find the watch. He's been calling pawn shops, contacting collectors. He's determined to get it back." "I know," I said. "It means a lot to him, to all of us." "He's been setting aside money from his personal spending allowance," Emily continued, "taking lunch to work instead of buying it, cutting back on his coffee shop visits. Little things that add up." The sacrifice touched me. Under their strict budget, David's personal spending money was likely quite limited. That he would prioritize saving for the watch over small daily comforts spoke volumes about his commitment to making amends. "I want to help him," Emily said, surprising me again. "I have some jewelry I could sell. Nothing sentimental, just expensive pieces I bought during my keeping up appearances phase. They're sitting in a drawer anyway, and I'd rather use that money for something meaningful." The offer seemed genuinely selfless, a quality I'd rarely associated with Emily. "That's very generous of you." "It's the right thing to do," she said simply. "The watch is important to your family, to our family. I want to be part of recovering it, not just a bystander." Something had shifted in Emily, a fundamental reorientation of priorities that went beyond financial pragmatism. She was choosing family legacy over material possessions, substance over appearance. "Have you told David about your idea?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to make sure it wouldn't seem, I don't know, presumptuous? Like I'm inserting myself into a family matter that doesn't concern me." "Emily," I said gently, "you are family. And helping David recover something this meaningful to him, that absolutely concerns you." Her eyes widened slightly at my words. "You really think of me as family, even after everything that's happened?" "Family isn't just about blood or legal ties," I told her. "It's about commitment, about showing up for each other, about prioritizing relationship over self-interest. You've been demonstrating those qualities these past months." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from her that wasn't anger or pride or calculation. "That means more than you know," she said, her voice thick. "Growing up, family was just obligation, social appearances, criticism disguised as concern. I never had what David had with you and Robert." Her vulnerability opened a door to understanding that had previously been closed to me. Emily's behavior, Her focus on status, her transactional approach to relationships, her difficulty with genuine connection, stemmed from a family system vastly different from the one I'd created with Robert. Family can be learned, I said softly. The patterns we grow up with don't have to define the families we create as adults. Emily wiped at her eyes, nodding. That's what I'm trying to do. Unlearn some things, learn others. It's harder than I expected. Most worthwhile things are, I observed. We talked for another hour, our conversation flowing more naturally than ever before. Emily shared more about her childhood, the cold, achievement-oriented household where love was conditional on success, the parents who saw her as an extension of their own status rather than an individual with her own needs and desires. I spoke about my own upbringing, the values Robert and I had tried to instill in David, the mistakes we'd made along the way. When she finally left, Emily hugged me, a genuine embrace, not the stiff, obligatory gesture she'd offered in the past. Thank you for listening, she said, for seeing me as more than just the difficult daughter-in-law. We're all more than our worst moments, I told her. Or our best ones, for that matter. That evening, I called David to share Emily's idea about selling her jewelry to help fund the search for the watch. His surprise and gratitude were evident in his voice. She really offered that? He asked, sounding amazed. Without me suggesting it? It was entirely her idea, I confirmed. She came by specifically to discuss it with me before talking to you about it. Wow, David said, clearly processing this unexpected development. She's really changing, isn't she? We all are, I pointed out. That's what growth looks like. The search for Robert's pocket watch became a family project over the following months. David tracked down the collector who had purchased it from the pawn shop, only to discover he had sold it to another collector, who had subsequently moved out of state. Each lead required patient investigation, phone calls, emails, sometimes travel to meet with potential sources of information. Emily threw herself into the search with surprising dedication, using her marketing skills to create a systematic approach to contacting watch collectors and dealers. She designed a simple website with the watch's description and history, linked to an email address specifically for tips or information. I contributed what I could, detailed descriptions, photographs of similar watches, connections to Robert's, old friends and colleagues who might have resources or contacts in the antique watch community. The shared purpose united us in a way that transcended our past conflicts, giving us a common goal that wasn't about money or status, but about family heritage and making amends. 4 months into the search, we got our first promising lead. Oh, dealer in Chicago recognized the watch from our website description, believing he had sold it to a retired physician who collected timepieces with medical associations. Robert's watch, with its inscription thanking his great-grandfather for dedicated service to patients in their darkest hours, fit that collector's specific interest. David immediately reached out to the physician, Dr. Alan Mercer, explaining the watch's personal significance and his desire to recover this family heirloom. To our collective relief, Dr. Mercer responded with compassion and interest in our story. While I've grown quite attached to the timepiece, he wrote in his email, I understand the sentimental value it holds for your family. I'd be willing to discuss its return under the right circumstances. Those right circumstances involved a price significantly higher than what David had saved so far, nearly double the amount the doctor had originally paid for the watch. It was a fair market value given the watch's age, condition, and provenance, but it presented a financial challenge we hadn't anticipated. David called me the evening after receiving Dr. Mercer's price. It's more than I expected, he admitted, the disappointment evident in his voice. Even with Emily's jewelry, we're still short by about $4,000. What are you thinking? I asked, resisting the immediate impulse to offer the money myself. This was David's amends to make, his responsibility to fulfill. Stepping in to solve the problem for him would undermine the growth he'd demonstrated these past months. I'm not sure yet, he said thoughtfully. I could pick up some freelance design work on weekends. It would take a few months to earn the difference, but I think Dr. Mercer would be willing to wait if I explained the situation. That sounds like a reasonable approach, I said, proud of his problem-solving without resorting to credit cards or loans. There's another option, David continued hesitantly. Dr. Mercer mentioned he's renovating a vacation cabin in Michigan. As an architect, I could offer to create custom design plans for his renovation as partial payment. It would save him money on architectural fees and reduce the cash amount we need to raise. The creative solution impressed me. It leveraged David's professional skills, provided real value to Dr. Mercer, and addressed the financial shortfall without compromising their careful budget. That's brilliant, I told him sincerely. Have you discussed it with Emily? Not yet, he admitted. I wanted to think it through first. Weekend work would impact our time together, and she's been really looking forward to our weekend hikes and the cooking classes we signed up for. His consideration for Emily's feelings, for their relationship beyond just financial matters, showed a maturity that had been lacking in years past. The old David would have made unilateral decisions about money, often prioritizing quick fixes over relationship consequences. Talk to her, I encouraged. She's invested in finding the watch, too. I think she'll understand and support whatever approach you decide on together. David called the next day to report that Emily had not only supported his design work idea, but had offered to leverage her marketing skills to help find additional clients for his weekend freelancing. She said we're a team, he told me, his voice filled with wonder. That my goals are her goals too. The resolution unfolded over the next several weeks. Dr. Mercer enthusiastically accepted David's offer of custom design services, reducing the cash requirement significantly. The remaining amount came from Emily's jewelry sale and David's weekend work designing a small retail space for a former colleague. 4 months later, nearly a year after David's original confession about the watch, the three of us drove to Chicago to meet Dr. Mercer and complete the exchange. The elderly physician welcomed us into his elegant home with genuine warmth, serving tea and sharing stories of his own family heirlooms and their significance. I've collected timepieces for nearly 40 years, he explained, but I've always believed that objects with true family history belong with their families. The craftsmanship of this watch is exceptional, but its meaning to your family far exceeds its value to my collection. When he finally placed the watch in David's hands, the emotion on my son's face brought tears to my eyes. David cradled the timepiece reverently, opening the gold case to reveal the familiar face and delicate hands that had marked time for 4 generations of Wilson men. Thank you, he said to Dr. Mercer, his voice thick with emotion. I can't tell you what this means to us. The physician nodded in understanding. Family legacies are precious. I'm pleased to be part of restoring yours. The drive home was mostly silent, each of us processing the significance of the day. David kept the watch in his pocket, occasionally reaching down to touch it as if reassuring himself of its presence. When we arrived back at my house, I invited them in for dinner, wanting to extend the sense of completion, of family unity that the day had created. As we sat in the living room waiting for our takeout to arrive, David removed the watch from his pocket and held it out to me. I think you should keep it, he said softly, at least for now. I shook my head. It was your father's gift to you. He wanted you to have it. I know, David nodded. And someday I will have it again. But I need to earn it back, not just financially, but in all the ways that matter. I need to demonstrate that I understand what it represents: consistency, integrity, family commitment. David, I began, but he gently interrupted. Please, Mom. Let me do this my way. Let me spend some more time becoming the kind of man who deserves to carry this family legacy. His sincerity moved me deeply. This wasn't about punishment or unworthiness. It was about personal accountability, about aligning his actions with his values before claiming the symbol of those values. All right, I agreed, accepting the watch with care. I'll keep it safe until you're ready. Emily, who had been watching this exchange silently, spoke up. Could I see it? David handed her the watch, and she examined it with genuine interest, studying the engravings, the fine details of its craftsmanship. It's beautiful, she said. Not just as an object, but because of what it represents. 4 generations of your family, all connected through this one item. 5 generations eventually, David said, meeting her eyes meaningfully. When we have children of our own. Emily smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. 5 generations and beyond. As I watched them, my son and the woman who had once seemed so wrong for him, now united in values I recognized and respected, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The watch was back where it belonged, and more importantly, so was my family. Not perfect, still growing, but together in all the ways that truly mattered. The pocket watch now sits on my bedside table, a tangible reminder of loss and recovery, of mistakes and redemption, of a family finding its way back to what matters most. Someday, when the time is right, it will pass to David's hands again. And when it does, he will understand its true value in a way he never could have before it was lost. The seasons had turned twice since the recovery of Robert's pocket watch. Spring had bloomed into a particularly vibrant display this year, my garden bursting with color as if celebrating the renewal that had taken place within our family. David and Emily had maintained their financial recovery plan with admirable consistency, their monthly checks continuing to arrive, accompanied by thoughtful notes or small tokens, a jar of homemade preserves, a watercolor Emily had painted in her new art class, photographs of their weekend hiking trips. Today, however, was special. I'd received a cryptic text from David 2 days ago. Mom, important family dinner at our place this Saturday, 6 p.m. Dress casual but festive. When I'd asked for more details, he'd simply responded with a smiley face and, "It's a surprise." As I approached their home, the same house they'd nearly lost to financial mismanagement but had now stabilized through careful budgeting and responsible choices, I noticed several cars parked along the street, a gathering larger than our usual quiet family dinners then. Curiosity quickened my steps. Emily opened the door before I could knock, her face alight with a genuine warmth that still sometimes surprised me despite our improved relationship. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, her hair styled in loose waves rather than the severe professional style she'd once favored. "Margaret," she embraced me without hesitation. "Come in, everyone's almost here." "Everyone?" I echoed, stepping into their foyer. "Who else is coming?" Emily's smile turned mysterious. "You'll see, David's in the backyard setting up. Why don't you head out there while I wait for the last guests?" I made my way through their home, noting the subtle changes that reflected their evolving priorities. The ostentatious artwork had been replaced with personal photographs and a few quality pieces they truly loved. The designer furniture was gone, exchanged for comfortable, well-made pieces that invited actual living rather than just impressing visitors. The house felt like a home now, lived in, authentic, welcoming. The transformation extended to the backyard, where David was arranging chairs around several tables adorned with simple yet elegant centerpieces of wildflowers in mason jars. Strings of warm white lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a magical canopy that would illuminate the space once twilight fell. "Mom!" David greeted me enthusiastically, setting down the chair he'd been positioning to give me a proper hug. "You're right on time." "For what exactly?" I asked, surveying the elaborate setup. "This looks like more than a regular dinner." Before he could answer, the sliding door opened again, and my neighbor Grace stepped out, followed by several familiar faces from my book club, my garden society, even my financial advisor Richard and his wife. "What's going on?" I asked, thoroughly confused now. "Why are all my friends here?" David's smile widened. "Just wait," he said cryptically. "One more guest of honor, and then we'll explain everything." The final arrival came minutes later, a distinguished older gentleman I recognized immediately as Dr. Mercer, the watch collector from Chicago who had returned Robert's pocket watch to our family. "Dr. Mercer," I greeted him with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Margaret?" He nodded warmly. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world, and please call me Alan." David clapped his hands for attention, drawing everyone into a loose semicircle around where Emily and I stood. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying easily in the pleasant evening air. "Most of you know pieces of our family's journey over the past couple of years, but none of you except Mom, Emily, and Dr. Mercer know the full story." He proceeded to share a candid, sometimes painfully honest account of our family's struggles, the financial irresponsibility, the damaged relationships, the difficult path toward recovery and reconciliation. He spoke of the lost watch and its eventual recovery, of lessons learned and values reclaimed. "Which brings us to tonight," he continued, moving to stand beside me, taking my hand in his. "Mom, you taught me, reminded me really, what family truly means. Not convenience, not transactions, but commitment, honesty, showing up for each other even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." Emily joined us, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Margaret, when I first joined this family, I didn't understand what that word really meant. My experience of family was different, cold, conditional. You showed me through your actions, your boundaries as well as your forgiveness, what family can and should be." My throat tightened with emotion. "You've both worked so hard," I managed. "I'm proud of you." David smiled. "We wanted to thank you properly, to celebrate not just our journey, but your wisdom and patience that made it possible. So tonight is for you, a gathering of your chosen family, the people who matter most in your life." Emily reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, familiar object, Robert's pocket watch, its gold case gleaming in the early evening light. "We think it's time this returned to you," she said, placing it gently in my palm. "Not because David doesn't deserve it yet, but because we want to start a new tradition." David nodded. "The watch has always passed from father to son, a symbol of the Wilson family legacy. But you, Mom, you're the heart of that legacy. You're the one who held firm to those values when I lost my way. The watch belongs with you until—" He trailed off, exchanging a meaningful glance with Emily, who nodded encouragingly. "Until our child is born, 6 months from now," he finished, his voice thick with emotion. "We'd like you to be the one to pass it on to the next generation, when the time comes." The revelation stunned me into momentary silence. A grandchild? After years of them insisting they weren't ready for children, this news felt like a miracle. "You're pregnant?" I finally managed, looking at Emily with wonder. She nodded, her hand moving instinctively to rest on her still flat abdomen. 14 weeks along. We wanted to wait until we were past the first trimester to share the news. Joy bubbled up within me, eclipsing any remaining hurts or disappointments from the past. "A baby," I whispered, tears springing to my eyes. "I'm going to be a grandmother." The gathering erupted in congratulations and well wishes, glasses of champagne and sparkling cider for Emily, appearing as if by magic. As the celebration continued around us, David drew me aside, his expression suddenly serious. "There's one more thing, Mom," he said quietly. "Something I need to say publicly." He turned to address the gathered friends and family once more, raising his voice to be heard above the happy chatter. "Before we continue celebrating, there's something important I need to acknowledge," he announced. The conversations quieted as attention returned to him. "For years, I treated my mother as a financial resource rather than as a person with her own needs and feelings. I took advantage of her generosity, her forgiveness, her unconditional love. Emily moved to stand beside him, taking his hand in silent support. When she finally established boundaries, when she refused to fund an irresponsible purchase that would have deepened our financial problems, I resented her for it. Worse, I allowed my wife to believe that Margaret wasn't really family when inconvenient, but suddenly became family when we needed something from her. His public acknowledgement of this painful history brought fresh tears to my eyes, but these were healing tears, washing away the last residue of hurt rather than adding to it. I want everyone here to know, David continued, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident in his face, that the greatest gift my mother ever gave me wasn't financial support or even this family heirloom. He gestured to the watch now resting in my hand. It was the gift of boundaries, of consequences, of the hard truth when I needed to hear it. Emily stepped forward, addressing the group herself now. And I want to acknowledge my part in this, as well. I treated Margaret abominably, excluding her when it suited me, demanding her help when it benefited us. I misunderstood what family meant because my own experience was so limited. Margaret taught me through her actions what true family looks like, honest, sometimes messy, but always rooted in genuine love rather than obligation or appearance. The vulnerability of their public admissions moved me deeply. This wasn't just a private reconciliation anymore. This was a declaration of changed values, of lessons learned, of a new path forward together. David, Emily, I said, finding my voice at last. Thank you for this beautiful evening, for gathering the people who matter most to me, for sharing your wonderful news. But most of all, thank you for doing the hard work of growth and change. That's the greatest gift you could give me. I opened my hand, looking down at Robert's watch resting in my palm. This timepiece has witnessed 5 generations of our family's history, the triumphs and the struggles, the losses and the recoveries. Now it will witness the arrival of a 6th generation. I looked up, meeting David's eyes first, then Emily's. Our family isn't perfect. We've hurt each other, disappointed each other, failed each other at times. But we've also forgiven, grown, learned to love better. That's the true legacy worth passing on. Not gold or heirlooms, but resilience, integrity, the courage to face hard truths and choose better paths. Dr. Mercer stepped forward, raising his glass. To family, not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose to become together. The toast echoed around the circle, glasses clinking as twilight deepened, and the string lights overhead began to glow like earthbound stars. As the evening progressed into night, filled with laughter, stories, and genuine connection, I found myself observing more than participating, soaking in the miracle of this moment. My son, once lost in materialism and appearance, now grounded in substance and authenticity. My daughter-in-law, once cold and calculating, now warm and sincere, her hand resting protectively over the new life growing within her. My friends, gathered to support and celebrate not a financial milestone, but a relational one. And at the center of it all, a simple gold watch, ticking steadily onward, marking time not just in hours and minutes, but in generations connected through love, through struggle, through forgiveness. Later, as the party began to wind down, Emily found me sitting alone at one of the tables, watching the happy interactions around me. "Having a good time?" she asked, lowering herself carefully into the chair beside me. "The best," I assured her. This was a wonderful surprise. She smiled, fidgeting slightly with her napkin. "There's something else I wanted to tell you, something I didn't want to say in front of everyone." "What is it?" I asked, concerned by her sudden seriousness. "I've been thinking about names for the baby," she said. "If it's a boy, David, and I agree he should be named Robert after his grandfather." The sentiment touched me deeply. David's father would be so honored. And if it's a girl, Emily continued, meeting my eyes directly, I'd like to name her Margaret. The suggestion caught me completely by surprise. After me? Emily nodded. You're the strongest, wisest woman I know. The kind of woman I want my daughter to become. It seems fitting that she should carry your name. Emotion overwhelmed me, rendering me momentarily speechless. I reached for Emily's hand, squeezing it gently in lieu of the words I couldn't quite form. Is that okay? She asked, suddenly uncertain. If you'd rather we didn't… It's more than okay, I managed finally. It's a gift I never expected. Thank you, Emily. She smiled, relieved. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to. Thank you for showing me what family really means. As she spoke, David appeared at her side, resting a hand on her shoulder. Everything all right here? Everything's perfect, I assured him, including him in my smile. Your wife was just telling me about your name choices for the baby. David's face softened. Dad would be proud of how far we've come. He always believed in second chances, in the possibility of growth and change. He did, I agreed, thinking of my late husband, of how much he would have loved this moment. And he would adore being a grandfather. Tell me about him, Emily requested, settling more comfortably in her chair. The kind of grandfather he would have been. So as the party continued around us, I shared stories of Robert, his patience with young David, his unwavering integrity, his belief in the importance of family bonds. David contributed his own memories, moments I hadn't witnessed or had forgotten. Together, we painted a portrait of the man who had helped shape our family's values, whose pocket watch had become a symbol of all we had lost and found again. Later, that night, back at home, I placed the watch carefully on my bedside table, watching as moonlight glinted off its polished surface. In 6 months, give or take, a new generation would enter our family, Robert or Margaret, continuing the legacy of values we'd struggled to maintain through difficult times. I thought of the inscription inside the watch cover, words written over a century ago but still resonant today. Time passes, but love endures. My fingers traced the familiar phrase, understanding it more deeply now than ever before. Time had, indeed, passed, through estrangement and reconciliation, through loss and recovery, through disappointment and redemption. And love had endured, not perfect, not unbroken, but resilient, strong enough to withstand hard truths and painful growth, strong enough to forge a family bound not by obligation or convenience, but by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to show up for each other even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. That was the true inheritance worth passing on, worth protecting. Not the gold case or the mechanical workings, but the values they represented: integrity, responsibility, the courage to acknowledge mistakes and make amends, the wisdom to prioritize relationships over appearances. As I drifted toward sleep, I imagined a future scene, myself as a grandmother, placing this watch in the tiny hands of Robert or Margaret, beginning the story with, "Once upon a time, your grandfather carried this watch." The thought filled me with profound peace, a sense of completion, of cycles continuing as they should. My daughter-in-law had once said I wasn't family when it was inconvenient, then suddenly became family when they needed my signature for a loan. But tonight, surrounded by those who truly valued me for myself rather than what I could provide, I understood that family isn't determined by convenience or genetics or legal documents. It's created through consistent choices, through showing up, through speaking truth with love, through setting boundaries and offering forgiveness in equal measure. We had all learned that lesson the hard way. But perhaps those are the lessons that matter most, the ones earned through struggle, through failure, through the painful process of growth and change. Our family story wasn't perfect or easy, but it was authentic. It was ours, and it would continue, generation after generation, marked by the steady ticking of a gold pocket watch that had witnessed it all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.